Hi, this is Matt with LSAT Cracked. In this lesson, we're going to discuss the correct approach, the correct mindset, and sort of checklist approach that you take into every logic game that you encounter. This is obviously an important thing to know, but it's only become more important in recent years, where the LSAT test writers appear to have been attempting to mix things up a little bit and present students with a relatively higher percentage of games that don't fit into a recognizable cookie cutter form that they've seen from previous old LSATs. It's become more and more important in 2020 and beyond to make sure that you actually understand the core skills and the correct approach for any logic game you might come across, instead of simply hoping that 3 or 4 of the logic games you encounter will be cookie cutter memorization tasks for you to simply perform on autopilot. Step 1. Put your pencil down and simply read the game. For a couple of reasons. 1, it helps you calm down. 2, you need to make sure that you read the game correctly. You need to make sure that you're reading the intro paragraph just as carefully as the indented rules. Now, we're going to have specific lessons for each of these components, but at a high level, you want to make sure that you're reading the game. You're always going to be asking, what type of game is this? Do I recognize it? Are there elements of this game, either sequencing or grouping or otherwise, that help me recognize or map this game to a template that I already know, at least to some degree? Number 2, you want to ask yourself what type of setup would be most helpful. Now, there's some debate as to whether or not you'd write the rules first or you'd write a setup first. Whenever possible, my default rule is to always try and do the setup first, because the type of setup you choose, and you always want to choose a setup that is the most spatially and intuitively helpful for a game as possible. Once you choose that setup, that's going to partially inform the way that you may choose to write certain rules. As a very easy example, if the game is horizontal because the houses are arranged on the street from west to east, you'd obviously want to write your rules like A lives immediately east of B in a horizontal fashion rather than a vertical fashion. That's an obvious example. There are some more subtle ones later on in the course. Okay, that's the first 2, right? Read the game and understand what type of game it is. Number 2, what type of setup is most helpful. Third thing you ask yourself is, okay, I'm going to go through and I'm going to write out all the rules. Now, the number 1 mistake students make is they write out the rules, but they do so in a way that's basically no more helpful to them than simply rewriting the entire sentence in English. That's not helpful. You already have it written down on the screen. So simply rewriting the rule doesn't really help that much. Where you really unlock a lot of value is where you ask, what is the most spatially intuitive and helpful way that I can capture this rule onto this setup? So the number 1 rule there is, if the rule can be instantiated or put directly into your setup, that's almost always going to be superior to simply writing it off to the left-hand column next to your game. Last thing before you go on to the questions. So for the last thing for this video, you want to ask, what deductions can I make? We're going to have a separate lesson on the deduction checklist. But at a high level, you're going to want to check for common variables, common slots or groups, and last, but certainly not least for the hardest logic games, you're going to want to test the extremes of the game. Colloquial way of saying that is, you're going to want to try to break the game. What can you do that would break the game? If you do those 3 things, test for common variables, test for common slots or groups, and test for extremes, you're going to uncover a lot of deductions that are extremely helpful for you then attacking the questions. One of the number 1 mistakes that students make, and you're going to see this theme recurrent throughout my advice, is students rush on the beginning portion of LSAT problems. Logic reasoning stimulus, reading comp passage, logic game intro rules. They rush there and they pay the price later when the questions seem very hard to them and they're agonizing between C versus E. If you instead spend a good amount of time really understanding the game, you are going to be able to move through the questions much more quickly and much more accurately. Good luck.